Now, there are some very important considerations to think about when eating a plant-based diet. There's more that has to be planned and included in a plant-based diet to ensure proper intake of proteins, vitamins, minerals, and more. Combining sources of protein from plant-based eating is necessary in order to get the essential amino acids required for certain health and growth processes. Remember that there are 20 amino acids, 9 of which are considered to be essential, meaning that our bodies don't synthesize them. We have to eat them in our diets. Here's the key challenge for plant-based eaters: getting the essential amino acids found in animal products, like meat, milk, eggs, and the like, into your diet. Most plant sources of food have incomplete proteins, meaning they lack one or more of the essential amino acids needed to maintain or build your muscle tissue. The thing to do is to combine plant sources of food in order to create a mixture that is a complete protein. As we've discussed, the most common example of food combined to make a complete protein is rice and beans. 1 cup of rice has about 5 grams of protein, and a half cup of black beans has about 9 grams of protein. Together, you get a complete protein and roughly 15 grams of protein. It's easy enough to combine foods. Here's the issue, though. To get this amount of protein, a plant-based dieter must also consider that they're eating roughly 300 or more calories to get those 15 grams of protein, along with a lot of carbohydrates. However, you certainly can get enough protein and even grow muscle on a plant-based diet. You just need to know what you're doing. Research has also indicated that we absorb about 95% of animal proteins that we eat, but we only absorb about 85% of plant proteins. So even when you combine plant sources of protein in order to create a complete protein, you would need even more than a meat eater to get the protein your body needs for muscle growth and maintenance. Some other vegetarian options for protein intake can also include eggs or egg whites and milk and dairy products like cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, and whey or casein protein powders. For vegans, those who eat no meat, eggs, or dairy products, some protein options include legumes, grains like quinoa and buckwheat, nuts and seeds, and foods like tofu, soy or soy milk, and tempeh. Now, plant-based diets may also be low in other nutrients. It is not uncommon for plant-based eating to lead to low or deficient levels of vitamin B12, because B12 is only found as a good source in animal products like meat, fish, eggs, and dairy products. You can get B12 in foods like cereals that are fortified with B12, but otherwise supplementing may be needed. Iron is also a nutrient that needs some special attention in plant-based diets. The form of iron that is most readily absorbable comes from animal products. It's called heme iron, and it makes up about 40% of the iron in meat. The less well-absorbed form of iron, found in plants like nuts, grains, vegetables, and fruit, is called non-heme iron. Plant-based dieters need almost 2 times the amount of iron from plant sources to get the same amount of iron as meat eaters. Another important finding is that vitamin C helps you to absorb the non-heme plant-based iron. But calcium and tannins found in drinks like tea and coffee reduce non-heme iron absorption. Because many plant-based eaters consume a good amount of vitamin C, found in foods like peppers, kale, and broccoli, the absorption of iron may not be an issue at all. It just makes sense to combine iron intake with vitamin C and try to have calcium supplements or tea and coffee an hour or two before you eat iron-rich foods. Vitamin D is also a special concern for plant-based eating. Dairy foods are often fortified with vitamin D, meaning that vitamin D is added to the final food or drink during processing. Some plant-based dieters avoid dairy as well as meat. Actually, the best source of vitamin D is sunlight. So, if you're a vegetarian lacking in vitamin D, and it is winter, and you don't get much sun, then you will want to supplement with vitamin D. You'll probably want to talk to your doctor or healthcare professional about this. Plant-based eaters should also pay special attention to omega-3 fats in their diets. Very good sources of omega-3 fats are cold water fish, but plant eaters can go for walnuts, seaweed, hemp, and flax, among other choices, to take in something called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. Now, ALA is then converted to something called docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA, and eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA. The types of fatty acids that are considered the heavy hitters of omega-3 fatty acids. These help with body composition and also are needed to ward off disease. The trouble is that the body uses the plant-based sources for omega-3s quite inefficiently. So once again, supplementation with a DHA or EPA product from fish oil, krill oil, or an algae-based product is needed. Other needs for plant-based eating include both calcium and zinc. Again, these can be consumed in the diet, but absorption of both tends to be low compared to non-vegetarians. Well, zinc is found in a lot of plant foods like lentils, peanuts, and quinoa. Its absorption is lower than it is when you get it from animal products. This just means that plant-based eaters need to take in more zinc to fulfill the same requirements. If you are very physically active and trying to train for performance, a few other dietary considerations include traditional sport supplements like creatine and beta-alanine. Now, creatine is made naturally in your body, but you also get some from your diet. If you eat meat and fish, that is. Those who only eat plants will have lower levels of stored creatine. Because creatine is used for short, explosive movements and has shown to have some benefits for cognition, neurological disorders, and muscle mass, supplementing with creatine might be something to consider. It turns out that vegetarians have about 50% less carnosine in their muscle tissue. Due to the link between carnosine concentrations and overall health, as well as evidence for exercise performance advantages emerging in the scientific literature, it is likely a good idea to also consider supplementing with beta-alanine for the production of carnosine. On a plant-based diet, make sure that you have a combination of plant proteins to meet your goals. A good variety of non-starchy vegetables like greens, spinach, arugula, broccoli, and squash. Include good fats like nuts, seeds, and healthy oils. And eat starches like bread, whole grains, and potatoes. Fruit and starchy vegetables like corn and peas to complete your energy needs. The health benefits come from a plant-based diet can be achieved by simply eating more plants. Changing gears, let's talk about some of the special nutrition needs of children. I often get the question from parents about what to feed their kids, and if a kid's diet is really any different from the way adults should eat. Well, yes and no. Both children and adults need carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. But the amount needed changes as we age. So the general recommendations are quite similar, but the details can vary. The three major nutritional concerns specifically for children are sufficient calories for proper growth, development, and performance, calcium and iron intake, and hydration. Active kids actually need more calories per kilogram or more calories per pound than adults do. They weigh a lot less, so their total intake is lower, but on a relative basis, kids need more food per pound of body weight. Dietary reference intakes exist for children, but remember that they are simply baseline recommendations meant to help children live illness and disease-free. They were not established for active kids looking to perform optimally, which is what I'd like to focus on. Relative to body weight, children need more protein and a higher percent of essential amino acids than adults because of their extreme growth rate. The recommendations for boys and girls are identical, with at least 13 grams of protein per day for kids ages 1 to 3, 19 grams for ages 4 to 8, and 34 grams for kids aged 9 to 13. After 13, the recommendations differ between boys and girls. And girls need at least 46 grams of protein, and boys need at least 52 grams of protein. This difference is mostly because boys tend to have a larger body size and larger food intake. One thing to consider, though, is that a range between 10 and 30% of protein in the diets is considered acceptable. So if your 9-year-old girl eats 1,800 calories per day, she may eat anywhere from 45 to 135 grams of protein. Some resources recommend that children who are athletes, or at least very active, eat about 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, or 0.7 grams per pound every day. To make it easy, I would simply use whole numbers and aim for slightly less than 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if your active child weighs 75 pounds, then aim for just less than 75 grams of protein. Carbohydrates also come with recommendations. Kids need about 130 grams per day. This would provide 520 calories from carbohydrates. And this may work well for your child, but you have to consider the same factors that you did for total calorie intake, especially their body size, growth rate, and activity level. These considerations primarily boil down to two basic recommendations. First, make sure that children eat enough food. And second, make sure they get enough protein to support rapid growth.